Welcome everyone to another CTC software webinar. My name is Sean Zerbis. I'm the Director of BIM Development here at CTC Software, and in today's session, we're going to be continuing with the Nexus CMS Admin Learning Series, focusing on how you can very easily or successfully process in your AutoCAD and Civil 3D content. Now, of course, as always, these webinars are recorded, so you can always come back to these in the future. So when you're doing this process yourself, you can review this live, you can kind of interact while we're going through it. Of course, today, if you are in Nexus right now in the CMS aspect, then you can certainly follow along with me. Now, also, as always, for those of you joining us live, we do try to answer questions throughout the webinar. So if you have questions about this topic, throw them into the questions window. More than happy to answer them while I'm going. And we also save a QA session for the end when after the primary recorded aspect of this webinar is all done. Without further ado, let's jump right in and start talking about today's content in a little bit more detail. So in the CMS, the next major step in kind of getting ready for your team to use this is actually to add your content. And I like to do this before I really begin inviting all my users because I want them to have something at their fingertips right away. That's my standard content. Now, most things are pretty easy to add to the CMS, but with AutoCAD and with Civil 3D, there's certain content that does have some specialized controls and some special things that you can do with them. So here in this webinar, we're going to dig deeper into specifically AutoCAD-centric content, DWG most specifically, but also tool palette content, some stylized things, certain extra support files that we can deal with. We're going to be talking about everything AutoCAD today in this particular session. Now we're going to go through and talk about first describing different AutoCAD content types. There's a lot of different AutoCAD content out there. Some things you might not even think of as AutoCAD content, but technically is used in the AutoCAD space often. And these are all things that we have to distribute. And so we're going to talk about these different content types. We are going to be processing specifically blocks and other support type files into the Nexus CMS. Then we're going to take a look at DWG hosted content and some special controls you can use with that. And we'll also talk lightly about how to plan for future content maintainability. So that as you make updates to your standards, as you add to your standards in your AutoCAD content, how you can maintain not just stuff that you want to process new, but also stuff that's already been processed in and certain things you're going to want to make sure you're thinking about. So first things first, let's talk about different types of AutoCAD-centric content. Now, with the AutoCAD content in particular, DWG, of course, is AutoCAD content. In fact, let me pull the CMS forward here on screen. I do have it open on screen. I'm already here on the search panel over here. And from the search panel, let's collapse our Revit filters and focus exclusively on AutoCAD filters here. And so if you check the box, by the way, for only AutoCAD content, you can't even expand out the Revit filters. It's going to collapse that because when you're only looking for AutoCAD stuff, it'll get that out of the way. So if you happen to work in a multidisciplinary firm, but you focus primarily on the AutoCAD side, I recommend leveraging the AutoCAD content filtration while you're kind of looking at this. Within my CMS, I have quite a lot of content already preloaded, and this list populates based on what content you actively have available to you. And so there's a lot of stuff that's AutoCAD content. The first thing we typically would think about probably is an AutoCAD block, and that is certainly in the list. You can also have an AutoCAD drawing or drawing templates. Your templating can be in here. You can have things like your AutoCAD scripts that you might be using, .scr files or .bat files that you might be using in your AutoCAD space. You can have sheet sets in here. There's a bunch of other command macros that you might be using on your ribbon right now in a custom CUIX file, or potentially distributing through tool palettes. You can have those command macros in here as well. Some of the slightly deeper content would be stuff like AutoCAD dimension styles, AutoCAD text styles, things like that. That is all content you can have, multi-leader styles. This is all stuff that can be directly from core AutoCAD available directly in your CMS environment, so you never have to worry about tool palette distribution ever again. Now, from the Civil 3D side, you can see here subassemblies, assemblies, and pretty much every single style, label styles, text styles, surface styles, multi-leader styles, all of these things that could potentially exist in Civil 3D directly, surface and survey styles and view frame types and all kinds of stuff is available to be processed in directly into the CMS. So not only do you not need to use tool palettes, you also don't necessarily need to train your teams on Design Center. You don't have to train your teams on Style Manager to how to transfer styles from one project or one AutoCAD drawing to another. This is so much easier when all of this content is just right there at your fingertips, and it's right there at your end user's fingertips as well. And one bonus to this, if you're using the Sim suites from CTC, so if you're using like Sim Project Suite, Sim Manager Suite, all of those settings files, those templates that you can save, all of that is available in here as well as the other AutoCAD content all side by side. So again, makes distributing these standards super, super easy. So those are all the different AutoCAD content types that are directly AutoCAD that you can put into this environment. Now, let's talk about how to process some of this content in. You can process blocks and basically any file-based support content directly into the CMS very easily by simply dragging and dropping some content across into the CMS Add Content window. So you do this by going to the Add Content area here. Now, first off, you want to make sure you're selecting a library into which that content will be processed. And if you're processing in specific types of content, like, I don't know, site parking content that I might be dropping in here in a moment, you might want to set that tag just to make it a little bit more searchable, because AutoCAD content doesn't have quite as many properties available for searchability that Revit content has. You might want to leverage the tagging a bit more and be consistent with your naming conventions to make it real easy for users to find it. But you can tag that stuff right away, making it super simple to filter down and find it. So how would you bring this content across? Well, I have over here a folder on my network drive, my O drive. And on this drive, I have, in my case, some parking components. Since I was just using the tags here for site parking, I have a whole bunch of parking componentry that I can bring in. This is just DWGs, they're individual dynamic blocks. And I can take all of this parking component, this sort of parking lot style stuff, and just drag and drop it here into the CMS environment. Now it's going to scan each of these things. I probably should have added fewer of them, but it's going to scan each of them and put them into the system. If you have other file-based content, and I'm not actually going to process, well, I guess I will process this one in a moment. Like if you have list routines, I only have one. It's a total length list routine. I use this when I want to select a bunch of lines and arcs that aren't a polyline, and I want to get the total length of it. This little list routine will let me do that. But normally you'd have to have this loaded into AutoCAD first or put onto a ribbon button, but you have to distribute that CUIX file. You got to maintain that version year to version year. That can be kind of frustrating. So one of the things I like to do is take these list routines. I like to rename them a little bit, but I'll throw them into the actual CMS space so that I can have that be runnable as well for my team. If you have .scr files or .bat files that you use, you can throw them directly in here as well. If you have DWTs, drawing templates, or if you have DSTs, drawing sheet set templates, you can simply drag them over here because it's all file-based content, and have that just like be available to your team to consume. So that saves a lot of the heavy lifting that we do with our AutoCAD profiles, because most of that stuff is setting up for list routine running and CUI distribution, potentially tool palette distribution, you know, all that stuff. I don't have to distribute really most of that because I can put the vast majority of that content directly into the CMS. Now, having dropped in, 30 different CAD files, it's taking it a second because it's scanning each one of those and trying to read it. And I should have dropped just one just because I know it takes a minute as it's building up this content here. But we'll let that think for a second. And we'll eventually click process down here on just a couple of those things so we can see them add into the system with those tags of site parking here in just a moment. The other thing that you can do, instead of processing blocks individually, which is, some of us have our AutoCAD library saved out as discrete individual block content, and that's great if you do that. But a lot of us also have a bunch of our content actually saved inside of a single warehouse DWG file that we source a lot of this from. Tool palettes have made that really nice and easy. Design Center sort of made that nice and easy to be able to pull blocks from a drawing with settings and put them directly onto a tool palette or distribute them through Design Center or some other block library technique. Maybe list routines helped you with this a little bit too if you had some list routines that do the insertion of blocks and setting of layers and things. But with that content, if you have stuff stored within a DWG, you can also harvest all of that directly into the CMS. It's not a drag and drop of a file like we did before. You actually browse to that warehouse file and you do some processing from it. Now, this is taking a little too long, so I'm going to kill it right now. I'm going to come back just because I don't want to wait for it to scan every single one of those files. I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. But with AutoCAD open, now I have AutoCAD 2023 open. Oh, that's why. It was waiting for me to answer a question in AutoCAD. That's why it was taking forever, because it was scanning each drawing and it was waiting for me to say yes to something. That's why the CMS was taking forever. I figured it was going to take a little less time than that, but I wasn't expecting AutoCAD to have be the hang up on that, probably because I had an active command running or something. But let's come back here to the add content and let's use the CAD files drop down here. So I'm just going to go ahead and repick the AutoCAD Civil 3D stuff here. I am going to add elements in an AutoCAD DWG, and I'm actually going to pick this Parking Tools Imperial sample file here. I forget the actual path for where this is, so I'm going to steal this real quick. I'm going to open up sample drawings because this is actually a, maybe I'll just take that sample file and I'll save it as someplace less buried here out here because it's currently behind, program files directory. So give me a second as I save this to a centralized location. And this will actually be leading us into our final topic here in just a moment, but I'm going to save this to my civil folder out here for parking, since I've got a bunch of parking content that I can now continue to add to since it's now centralized. Over here, if I do CAD files and I do elements in an AutoCAD DWG, what I can do is browse to where my centralized location here happens to be. So that's the wrong one. O drive, thank you, civil. Parking, and there is my parking tools. So instead of doing the individual drawings, I can do the actual blocks from this sort of container file. What this will do is scan everything that is addable from that container file, and in a little while here, after it scans everything, it will pop that up on screen for me and let me choose from stuff that exists inside that file. So here, for example, if all I wanted was the stalls, I can just filter for things that say the word stall. It should find more than that. There should be a bunch more. Standard stuff, let's just do category. Let's do category of AutoCAD blocks. Oh, it's probably because it's a variation of a bunch of those. That's fine. Let's uncheck all and only grab things like the sign, the handicap symbol, and that one stall. We'll just use just those. Maybe this curb area out here, we'll use just that as well. And you can see from this area here that all of those civil 3D styles are also available. Alignment styles, catchment styles, general styles, point styles. everything that you have over here in the settings of your warehouse file, your container that holds all of your standards, all of those settings are available to be added directly to the CMS as well. So your users can load style definitions directly into their projects or into their AutoCAD space. In my case, I'm only checking these 4 items. That's all that I want to add right now, because I'm going to be tagging those 4 items specifically, if I filter this down, as site parking, so that these are all parking items that I can actually work with. So I'm going to go ahead and take those. I'm going to process these 4 directly into the CMS. It's going to put it into my library. Because my drawing is actively open and hasn't yet been saved, so it's having an error. You actually don't want your container file open here in the AutoCAD space. You want that to be closed, honestly. So yeah, because it's being used by something else. Something else right now is using this. So if I was to close that file, let's just shut that down and try this again here real quick. Try reprocessing this. Now what it's going to do is scan that file, or it should scan that file. Each one of those things, it's going to open it, scan it, create a preview, close it, upload just that block. It's going to basically be doing some of that block extraction for me, but it lets me maintain that master file, so I don't have to maintain individual blocks. And the nice thing is that in that master file, if you already have your content, like a block placed on the right layer, it'll actually pull that in the individual block settings. This is very much like what you do with tool palettes, where you say, put a block on layer such and such, use these explicit properties, scale it in this way, use these options for dynamic blocks. It will actually take each of those blocks, if they are dynamic, and it will, reuse those properties. In this case, all of these were successful, and they now all exist in my library. So if I wanted to go search for those, my AutoCAD Civil 3D library, for anything that was labeled as site parking, how did I call that out? Parking. Oh, maybe I have to refresh this. That's probably why. There we go. There it is, site parking. I just hadn't refreshed my search list yet. That's why it was. So those 4 items now show up. And if it is a dynamic block, you'll see this little lightning bolt symbol there behind the logo of the library. So I could drop this now into any project I wanted, and whatever its properties were in the source file for the placed component, it will reuse those properties when I drop it into a brand new file. So whatever layer it was on, it will remember that layer. It will define the layer if it does not yet exist, and it will place it correctly in my new drawing on the expected layer. So really powerful little functionality there. So when you're adding content, you can either drag and drop individual discrete blocks into here, or you can source blocks from an AutoCAD DWG. Now, another way that you can source a bunch of content, which is really powerful here, is elements from AutoCAD tool palettes. So if you already invested some of your time in building up your tool palettes, but you're super frustrated with how tedious it is to maintain those tool palettes, well, you can just take those tool palettes and source a bunch of your settings directly from them, pull it directly in, and never have to maintain your tool palettes on into the future, distributing them to all of your end user computers, because that can be really frustrating. So here, elements from an AutoCAD tool palette, in my case, I'm already browsed to the default tool palettes location here. I'm gonna grab my custom CTC parking tool palette that I put together, which is all the same blocks, but it's got everything from there, and it already has all the settings from that ATC file, all the layers that I want everything to go to, whatever they might be. In my case, they're all layer 0 right now, but it finds all of that block content, and it knows what the AutoCAD file is it came from. So it knows the source file path, which in my case was the sample drawing location. But I can add those elements directly to my list, and once again, I can process it into my library. I can tag it however I want it tagged, which in this case is all parking stuff. Within there, I can take individual settings. I can modify the individual block settings further if I want to. And instead of maybe going to a current layer, I can actually pick a specific layer that exists in an active drawing or that was in that file, or I can define a brand new layer like C-site-park or something. And I can also come down here to the new layer properties and define exactly what I want them to be. So I can on the fly define standards. I can on the fly set up whatever I want the dynamic properties for whatever that block happens to be. I can modify what they are going to be directly before it even gets dropped into a project. I can set up units and scale factors. You can control everything very much like you would on a tool palette, but this is pulled in whatever the default settings were from the tool palette, and then it lets me further manipulate them if I really want to. So if I was to click process here, all of this content would be processed. Well, now I'm going to do one more thing here. I was going to go back, I'm going to remove all this. I'm going to add that one Lisp file because I wanted to show that this can actually be done. You can directly distribute your Lisp routines right through the CMS. Now I should probably have labeled this as something interesting, you know, have some kind of a tag. I don't have any good tags for this. Maybe I would make like an AutoCAD commands or something that I could very easily filter for. Right now I don't have anything, so I'll just search for tlen here in just a moment. But if I process this Lisp routine in, or a series of Lisp routines, each one of them will be available to me, and I will be able to run them. If I was to clear out my my filter here, let's search for tlen, just so I can find my Lisp routines. So here it is. If I'm in AutoCAD doing some drawing, let's just go into, I don't know, I'll go into this file over here since it's on the O drive and I can actually edit it and it won't give me some read-only messaging. So now the way that tlen works, it's a total length thing. So if you have a line that you've drawn and you just have whatever the random lengths are and you do tlen, so if I go over here, run this, just load this up, come into my AutoCAD space over here. It says select objects, grab them. And, oh, there's my total length, 445.92 feet. So it loads and runs the Lisp routine all in one step, and it's distributed from a centralized location. And I don't have to put this on users' local machines. I don't have to manipulate profiles for this to work. I don't have to distribute tool palettes or custom CUI files for this to work. It just exists, and I can run it. And the same thing holds true with blocks, and the same thing holds true with all of the Civil 3D styles that you could potentially have. Now I have a much larger file that has a bunch more settings in it, and I've already processed in a whole bunch of content here that's available to me. So if I was to search this library for only AutoCAD content and search for like CTC as an example, there's a ton of assembly styles and blocks and templates and catch basins and, you know, you name it, all kinds of content that's available at my fingertips. That's my standards from my standardized file that a user can just load directly into their design space. I can have a stripping volume surface. I can have label styles. I can have assembly styles just readily available for me. Section styles just readily available in my drawing space. And I don't have to know what file they're ever coming from as an end user. And you, as an admin, you have your centralized file, and you're simply adding all of those standardized things from elements in a DWG, or from elements you've already set up on tool palettes, or if you want to define a brand new command macro that you need, a custom command that you need your team to be able to use, all of this is available very easily if you're an admin, that you can add this in directly to the CMS into a library. You can custom organize it with some tagging, and you can make this very, very easy for your team to find. Now, we've done searching videos before, searching presentations before on how you can filter for stuff. So if I'm like, hey, find me all of my AutoCAD Lisp routines that exist in this library, it'll go find all of it. There's, in my case, two Lisp files. I don't know what this one does because I didn't write it, but it does exist, and it's very easy to filter for that. Or if I was like, hey, find me in Civil 3D specifically all of my, oh no, let's actually do another AutoCAD thing here, text styles and dimension styles. If I apply this search, you can have all of your AutoCAD text and dimension styles at fingertips. So if I was like, well, find me anything that matched Arial, Arial. I can't spell. There we go. Find me anything that matches Arial. And it'll go through and search for everything that somehow matches Arial, even digging into content like standard here or survey dims here that uses the Arial font in its properties. So you can search inside of things as well to find whatever might match whatever your standard happens to be. In this case, I'm finding in the standard dimension style over here that I could load into my project really quickly just by loading. I could load that actually this is a standard text style. It could load that standard text style, which has Arial as its base. And now if I go to the text style command, I think it's ST. Oh, it's trying to rename it in this case. It can overwrite. Now, because I just loaded it in this case, and standard was already in my file, it just used whatever was there. But you can also force reload that and redefine things that are in your current AutoCAD file based on your standard settings over here. So if I was to open up styles, it would now have whatever the standard settings are here for the standard font style. Or again, I could load in a new one here for Arial and it would just bring in that standard style definition for Arial. So style, Arial here leverages that Arial font as it is supposed to, with all the settings that it's supposed to be having there. So it makes it very easy for you to bring in and re-import all of those settings and standards. So let's talk about one final thing that you all probably need to be thinking about as you're processing in your content. You want to make sure you're planning and setting yourself up for future content updates. Our standards change over time. They will morph. You will make corrections, especially now that it's so easy to distribute this. You might find things that you've been wanting to fix for years, but it's just too difficult to push those settings out to the rest of the firm, that you maybe just kind of stagnated on those standards for a long time. Well, now if you're making changes to those standards and you're pushing them into the CMS, you can always update any of that content. And in fact, let's just go find some of those blocks once again here. If I come back to the AutoCAD blocks that I was looking at, and let's go look for stall. So there's that 10-foot stall that I had processed into the CMS. If I want to refresh this in the future, I can tell this to update, and it will basically jump over to my add content window, and it will update that, or it should update that in a moment here. There we go. It rescans it, assuming it can find its original path. That's the key. It has to be able to find the original location from which this was added, or it will fail to actually update it. You can always come back to anything that you've processed in because it knows the original block name, but it also knows what you've aliased it as. You can change the what I'll call instance name of a block in the settings up here. You can rename this if you really want to. Now, maybe you want to rename this for different organizational standards or whatever. That's all fine. Just remember that you have in fact changed the instance name so that you can refresh and update that in the future. But the most important aspect of that, if you right-click update something, is that you've processed it from a sustainable location on your system, whether that be a OneDrive share that you all share, whether it be a network drive path, whether it be, I don't know, maybe an Autodesk Docs desktop connector location. As long as that path exists, you can refresh from it, and you can, in the future, continue to maintain your content. There's a few other things, and we'll talk about this in another session in depth, but you can export a list of content that exists in a discrete library, and you can turn around and update all of that content all at once. It can scan everything and it can look for any file changes, and it can add all that content back to the list to refresh it, provided you've got that from some centralized location that can actually be scanned. So that is the key, making sure that you've got your content in a sustainable shared location that many of your team who are going to be maintaining these libraries can access consistently. I do not recommend sticking this behind C users your desktop, right? Don't put it on your desktop, and then expect it to be refreshable in the future, that content will not be maintainable, because oftentimes you get a new computer, your desktop gets refreshed, you don't have access to the original stuff anymore, and that's kind of a big deal. So make sure you're setting yourself up. And most of us in the AutoCAD space are already doing this. We have our content already in some centralized location, and that is most of the time what our profiles try to point to. And that's great. Keep doing that, because then when you add your content into the CMS from that centralized location, then when you go searching for it, you'll be able to refresh that stuff with that centralized space, no problem. Your users, they won't really notice anything different. They're just loading in content, and it's going to be all good. And we talked about in the past how you can set up your settings. So if I pull forward the actual CMS settings over here for the organization, there are certain things that you probably want to make sure as an AutoCAD admin, an AutoCAD CMS admin, that you've probably set up. First off, I allow cloud content caching, which makes the CMS create a copy of your content very efficiently in its cloud. You don't have to do this. This is an option, but if you do this, then that content will exist in the cloud, and no matter where your users are, they'll be able to access, even if they don't have a VPN connection to your main network. And I tell the CMS to prefer that cloud content, which is typically far faster than telling it to go to your local network, especially if users are working remote or they're on a laptop, out in a job trailer. This makes it a lot easier, because as long as they have internet connection, which they would have to have had anyway for a VPN connection, they'll be able to search for, find, and consume that content on the fly. I also, one other setting really important for those of us in the AutoCAD space here is the suppression of the security dialog in AutoCAD. What this will do dynamically when the CMS goes and loads content the very first time, especially if you're using cloud content caching, is it will effectively update your support file paths and modify the secure load environment variable so that it doesn't actually pop messages all the time to the end user when they're trying to load content from a potentially non-supported location. Now, where does it load from when it's cloud cached content? Just so you're aware, it does load from the user's app data CTC CMS content cache if you've got the default cache location set up, or you can put this to wherever you'd like. Maybe you do have a support file location and you want your content to be going there. You can redirect this cache location to wherever you want this to go. Just understand, this is an organization-wide setting, and everybody, including your Revit team members, will be using the same cache location when the CMS goes and caches content locally. So we typically recommend just leveraging the user's app data folder. This is a location that automatically gets created by the CMS. So good spot to be using. But this suppress AutoCAD security dialog is something that I typically will use, just so that I don't have to worry about my users getting pop-ups all the time when they're running stuff that comes out of the CMS itself. All right. So with that, for those of you watching this as a recording, I want to say thank you. We hope you found this processing in of AutoCAD content to be valuable. We hope that you can come back to and reference this on into the future, so that you can get ongoing value from this admin learning series and be able to best maintain your AutoCAD content within the Nexus CMS environment. We do hope you come back for future webinars. Definitely take and like and subscribe this channel that you're looking at this with, so that you can be updated when there's other Nexus CMS videos coming out, or when our other webinars go live into our YouTube space.